Placemaking is an interesting concept, but involves various actors who live and work and otherwise use particular spaces and would like to make them into particular places that have special meaning and significance for them in terms of their cultural norms, their use of space, and the sense of being safe and secure in those spaces. Linking to the idea of placemaking is very often a local scale and a small scale at the neighborhood or even perhaps a domestic quarter. And when you work at that scale, it's very intimate. It requires space to interact with the people who inhabit it and the people who inhabit and make it to interact with it. To move up a scale to the urban or beyond the urban level can sometimes be much more complicated because the number of people, the diversity of stakeholder groups involved increases. And that then means that some of the same tools, methods, processes of placemaking, if one wants to use that term, don't work as well. They're not scalable in such an easy way. And therefore, it is also very easy to fall into a trap of localism where what works at the grassroots or the very local level can somehow seem divorced from the wider social, economic, political, environmental processes and forces that determine the shape of society and aspects of urban form. The challenge with building places, making places, and crucially, if we think in terms of transitions towards urban sustainability, is to work across these different geographical scales in terms of the way in which planners and the different segments of communities with whom and for whom they're working interact, but also in terms of the way in which national and regional and local government and the institutions of governance operate, but then also in terms of funding available at the continental level from the European Commission, for example, European Union, where there are all sorts of considerations in terms of the financial conditions attached to grants or loans or research funding. And inevitably, in order to obtain those funds, one has to make applications in a language, in a format, according to certain values and norms which the funders require. And somehow to bring these all together often involves compromises. But when you come back down to the local level, many individual actors or groups of actors are very unwilling to compromise on certain principles that they hold dear, even though the leader of the municipal council or the regional government or the province or state or whatever it is in particular countries may well understand that, but still has to mediate these relations up to the national government or the European level in order to make the application compatible with the funding source in order to have the resources to be able to do at least some of what local communities or segments of communities want. And there are always tensions and trade-offs and compromises that have to be reached if conflict or stalemate are to be avoided. I think the answer is that if some form of rapprochement or compromise is reached, then these funds can be used very productively. And if you look around, particularly the peripheral parts of many European countries, the European Regional Development Fund, for example, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of aspects of urban rehabilitation and renovation, have made a huge difference to the appearance of the places, their attractiveness to tourists, but most of all to the quality of life of the residents. And in some ways, actually, the history of the way in which urban renovation has been used to revive cities for inhabitants and turning them into major international tourist destinations is very well illustrated by Barcelona, where the transformation of the city for the Olympics in the 1980s has become a model that many cities worldwide now aspire to follow, to emulate, and which again exemplifies the way in which a charismatic and powerful local municipal leader galvanized the city, the financial institutions, the other stakeholders, along with funding from international sources. And as I say, this is now used and is taught in urban development and planning schools and even architectural schools around the world as a kind of urban entrepreneurial norm that had its origins here in Barcelona. In terms of what this all means, one could ultimately say that the objective in terms of addressing the conflicting needs of different community groups, of different stakeholders, different sectors of the economy, requires that sustainability, urban sustainability, should address fundamentally, as part of that transformation, social and spatial justice, by which we mean that the different neighborhoods, the different areas, suburbs of a city, and the people who live in them should feel that they are having their needs met, that they are not being exploited, and equally they are not exploiting others who live elsewhere. But at the municipal level, it also means that the accessibility of services, of infrastructure, of a certain quality of housing and other amenities and municipal provisions of one sort or another services are spread fairly equitably across the urban area. In other words, that it should not matter profoundly in which area you live, what quality of life, what frequency and quality and reliability of services or employment and livelihood opportunities you have access to. That is really what it boils down to. And yes, this kind of multi-scalar governance can, if it works effectively, and the way in which the challenges of climate change are being met, for example, where the impacts and the origins cross all sorts of territorial and political boundaries, shows very well with lessons from all over the world that this can indeed work from the global to the regional, the national, the subnational, and the local, and promote urban sustainability transitions or more radical transformations which improve access to quality of life and to social and spatial and environmental justice.